Life would have been very different for the residents of Hungerford had Michael Ryan heeded his own advice. Ryan gained his place in criminal history by committing one of the worst mass shootings England has ever seen. But what would cause a man of 27 years to commit such an atrocity? Our moment in crime is the Hungerford Massacre. Hungerford, a market town in Berkshire, England, with a population of 5,000 people. The place that Michael Robert Ryan called home. Ryan was born on the 18th of May 1960 to Alfred and Dorothy Ryan. Dorothy doted on her son and would often spoil him. Many found Ryan to be moody, and his reluctance to interact with others as a child and an adult resulted in Ryan being socially isolated. He eventually left school with no qualifications and began working as a handyman and a labourer, occasionally experiencing periods of unemployment. He kept a Labrador named Blackie and enjoyed a good relationship with his father, whose death from cancer in 1984 led to Ryan seeking help for depression. But Ryan's life was dominated by an obsession with guns, an obsession that would claim the lives of 16 people. Ryan was introduced to guns by his mother, who gave him his first air pistol. As a teenager, Ryan would shoot at his neighbours with an air rifle and was known in his neighbourhood for shooting garden birds. Kept in his bedroom was a collection of books about guns and survival magazines. Ryan obtained a shotgun license in 1978, and as his desire to expand his gun collection grew, he changed his license as the law required. In the year running up to the massacre, Ryan was vetted by the Thames Valley Police 3 times, once in November 1986 and twice in early 1987. A doctor had found Ryan to be sane, and police found no reason to deny the recurring applications to expand his licence. By the time of the massacre, Ryan owned 2 rifles and 3 handguns, the maximum amount of weapons allowed by the licence. Ryan also fulfilled another requirement of the law by installing a steel cabinet in the house he shared with his mother. In reality, however, Ryan kept his guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition in the garden shed. Ryan was also a member of 2 gun clubs, but this didn't satisfy his obsession with the weapons. Ryan always carried a gun on him, kept a gun in his car, and wore combat gear. In the month before the shootings, Ryan regularly bought ammunition and became the owner of a Kalashnikov AK-47 assault rifle. It seems that after his father's death, Ryan began living in a fantasy world. Ryan would tell people, including his mother, of his upcoming wedding, a friendship with a colonel, and his bankrupt property renovating business, all of which were imaginary. Road signs were used for target practice, and he liked to visit Savernake Forest, located near Hungerford, where he would pretend to be on military manoeuvres. It was in this very forest that the Hungerford Massacre would begin. In the late afternoon of the 19th of August 1987, Michael Ryan remarked to a police officer that Hungerford must be a bit of a mess. For earlier that day, Ryan had embarked on a shooting spree around the town. 16 people lost their lives and many had been wounded. Ryan's first victim was Sue Godfrey, who was shot dead in Savernake Forest as she was picnicking with her children. The children were left unscathed, but Ryan clearly wanted to make sure that Sue was dead. She had been shot 13 times. From there, Ryan drove to Hungerford, where he did the most damage. It has been theorised that after killing Sue Godfrey, Ryan planned to flee Hungerford, because after the spree ended, 3 guns and a survival kit were found in his car. However, his car failed to start, and rather than fleeing the town, Ryan continued his rampage. In an attempt to destroy evidence, Ryan set fire to his home, 4 Southview. He then continued with his shooting spree. Ryan had no specific targets. He fired at anyone who was unlucky enough to come across him. Some were able to survive their ordeal, but others were not so fortunate. 2 of Ryan's neighbours, Roland and Sheila Mason, were fatally shot in their back garden. Although Ryan was shooting indiscriminately, he spared the life of another neighbour, Dorothy Smith, an elderly deaf woman who, unaware that Ryan was shooting people, shouted at him for making a lot of noise. After this, Ryan headed for Hungerford Common, where Ken Clements was fatally shot as he tried to comfort his dog who had become frightened by the shootings. Ryan then made his way back to Southview, where he killed his Labrador Blackie. By now the emergency services were aware of the shootings, and one of the first police officers to respond, P.C. Brereton, was the next person to be murdered by Ryan. P.C. Brereton was shot and killed as he drove his police car down Southview. Ryan then began to make his way down Southview. Another resident of this street, Abdul Rahman Khan, was the next to be killed. Ryan then fired at George White, who was driving down Southview, killing him instantly and causing George's car to crash into P.C. Brereton's police car. Ryan's mother, Dorothy, confronted her son at this point, but even she would not be spared. Dorothy died after being shot 4 times. Francis Butler was the next to be murdered as he walked his dog in Hungerford's Memorial Gardens. A taxi driver, Marcus Barnard, was then killed as he drove past Ryan. Kathleen and Douglas Wainwright were the next targets. The couple were shot as they travelled to their son's home in Hungerford. Douglas would not survive. It would later turn out that their son was a local police officer and that he was the one who had vetted Ryan when he wanted to alter his licence to cover the very gun that killed his father. Eric Vardy and Sandra Hill were both shot and killed as they drove their respective vehicles through Hungerford. After killing Eric and Sandra, Ryan broke into the home of Jack and Myrtle Gibbs. Both Jack and Myrtle were shot, with Jack dying at the scene and Myrtle succumbing to her injuries in hospital. Ryan then targeted his final victim, Ian Playley, as he drove his family through the market town. Ian would die from a single bullet wound to the neck in hospital. The emergency services would come under fire from Ryan as they tried to get to those who had been shot, and even press helicopters became a target. After killing his final victim, Ryan made his way to Hungerford's John O'Gaunt Secondary School. It was from this building that Ryan would negotiate with police for an hour and a half. Ryan repeatedly asked about his mother's condition and threw his Kalashnikov out of a window. But Ryan did not surrender to the police. Shortly before 7 p.m, a single shot was heard coming from the classroom that Ryan had hid himself in. After making sure that the school was safe to enter, law enforcement found Ryan's body slumped in a corner near a classroom window. The massacre had finally ended. The survivors and families of the victims are still looking for answers. Ryan's autopsy found no abnormalities in his body, and he never revealed his motives for the massacre. A coroner's inquest was held and the jury returned verdicts of unlawful killings. Some criticised the Thames Valley Police for not stopping the shootings sooner. As a result of the massacre, the Firearms Amendment Act 1988 banned the public from owning semi-automatic rifles and restricted the use of shotguns with a magazine capacity of more than 2 rounds. Hungerford held a memorial and rededication service on the 8th of October 1987, and 60% of the town's population attended. 5 years after the massacre, a memorial garden was opened in Hungerford. But there is no doubt that even though nearly 30 years has passed, this small town still bears the scars of the Hungerford Massacre. Thank you for watching this episode of One Moment in Crime. Look out for a new episode next Thursday. I wish you pleasant nightmares.